everybody. Today we're going to take a look at the sense functions of the ear. Now we all know that the ears are responsible for our ability to hear, but we also know that ears are responsible for our sense of balance. So let's take a look at the ear and the parts that make up the ear and what they specifically do so we can understand both hearing and the sense of balance. So the first point I want to make is that the ear is divided into three parts: the external ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. So if we take a look at this picture here, you can see that the three are divided right here, and basically everything on the outside, but also including the tube that goes into the head, are found in the outer ear. In the middle ear, we can probably go ahead and cut the line right about here. So we have our eardrum, the three bones that make up the middle ear, in the middle ear portion, and then our inner ear contains the actual structures that sense sound and sense balance, and they're found in this what almost looks like a green snail. Of course it's not green, but the shape of it does resemble a snail. So those are the three parts to the ear. If we take a look and we start with the outside, the external ear, let's start with the term pinna. And pinna, as you can see from the picture, you have basically what we consider our earlobe and our outer ear structure. What's visible on the outside is our pinna. We also have, however, the ear canal, which we'll call the auditory canal, to be a little bit more scientific. And you can see that the auditory canal ends right at the eardrum right here, which has another scientific name of tympanic membrane. So once we get past the outer ear, we're now in the realm of the middle ear. And if you notice the type of structure that it seems to be surrounded by here, this is bone. So the middle ear is actually in a hollowed out portion of your temporal bone of your skull. And the main thing that that we focus on with the middle ear are the three bones that make it up. So often you hear them referred to as the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. They do have, of course, a more scientific name. The malleus is what we call this bone here on the outside. So it would be this one. You can see that it has a connection point to the tympanic membrane or your eardrum. Second, we have the incus, which is this one here. And it kind of has some specialized angles that allow it to vibrate in a certain way. And then lastly, we have the smallest bone in the body, known as the stapes or the stirrup, and that is this one right here. It's like a kind of a hoop-like shape that is situated against a base plate. And that base plate is going to vibrate on a window that we see here. The middle ear also has a bunch of different openings that basically open up into that area. First, the auditory canal, we said that it ends at the tympanic membrane, so that would be your first opening. The oval window is another opening right here. We have another window called a round window here, and there's liquid against these windows where the middle ear is open to and has air on the inside of this, liquid on the inside of that. And our last opening into the middle ear is right here. It's the eustachian tube, and this is going to open into the back of our pharynx as well. So that eustachian tube, which connects the middle ear to your nasopharynx, its job is to help you equalize pressure. And a lot of us have some experience with equalization of that pressure. When we go to high altitudes, whether by plane or by car, you'll hear your ears starting to pop. And the reason why is because the air on the inside, the air that you're experiencing in your environment, is likely to have lower air pressure than what you have inside of your skull and your head cavity. So what you're going to wind up doing to equalize the pressure is by moving around your lower jaw, you can actually open up that eustachian tube, and that will equalize the pressure between the two places. So the external atmospheric pressure against the tympanic membrane versus the middle ear cavity, which is closed when you go up suddenly in elevation, but then if you chew gum or if you if you yawn, you're able to open it up and allow air at the same pressure to equalize between the two. And that is what we refer to as your ears popping, when we can go ahead and equalize that pressure between the two air cavities separated by the tympanic membrane. The structure of the inner ear is made of a lot of different parts, so we'll go through them one at a time. We have the bony labyrinth, which is made of a vestibule, the cochlea, and the semicircular canals. So this one here, we're talking about all of this structure here, and all of this is encased in bone. The membranous labyrinth, the utricle and saccule inside the vestibule, cochlear duct inside the cochlea, membranous semicircular canals inside the bony ones. So what we're saying there is that all of this right here is lined with membrane on the inside of the bone structure. That's our membranous labyrinth. We also have our vestibule and semicircular canals. You can see that these canals here look like half circles, perfect name for semicircular canal. The vestibule is going to be this area right here in the center between these canals and this structure called the cochlea. Now, the balance and equilibrium that you experience, the sense of that happens in these semicircular canals, whereas the part of the ear that's concerned with hearing is in this cochlea right there. So the inner ear is almost split in half, the two serving different functions. And we've already mentioned that the external and the middle ear rely on air penetrating those cavities, whereas the inner ear, all of this structure here is filled with fluid. The fluid that it does contain winds up in different places. Endolymph is a clear potassium-rich fluid that fills the cochlear canal. So the cochlear canal, if you were able to cut open this almost snail shell-like structure here, you're going to find two big cavities and one triangular one. And the triangular one is going to be your cochlear canal, and that's where your organs that really perceive the sound, the mechanoreception, happens here. And then the paralymph is a different fluid that is going to wind up in this and this here. And both of them are going to aid the production of sound through a number of steps that we'll get to. Alright, so let's take an even closer look inside that cochlear duct and see what some structures that are inside that are pertinent to hearing. So the cochlear duct, we mentioned a minute ago that it is triangular in size and shape, and here it is. This is our cochlear duct. And it divides the entire cochlea into really three parts here, but it really does separate two of the liquid-filled sections. The first one on the top is called the scala vestibuli, and the one underneath it is called the scala tympani. And these, again, had paralymph inside of them. We have a roof on the cochlear duct here. It's called Reister's membrane in this diagram, but it's also called the vestibular membrane because the scala vestibuli sits right on top. So this right here is your vestibular membrane. Okay, I'll put that in a different color just so it sticks out a little bit better. The basilar membrane is the floor of the cochlear duct, so that sits down here. And both of these are flexible. So if there is a change in the liquid's pressure as force goes through, you're able to force that membrane downward into the cochlear duct. The organ of Corti is going to rest on the basilar membrane, and it consists of supporting cells and hair cells, and that's what we have right here. This is our organ of Corti in green. And we even have another one that's important here called the tectorial membrane, which sits over the top like a roof on top of the organ of Corti. So as far as how do we perceive sound, we have to go through some basics about what sound actually is. Sound is created by vibrations, and the ability to hear those sounds is going to depend on a few things: volume, pitch, other acoustic properties. So as sound is being produced, what's going to happen are the air molecules are going to be sped up, slam into each other, slow down in waves. As sound comes out, the air molecules respond to it. And we have a membrane that also responds to air waves of pressure striking it, which is our tympanic membrane, our eardrum. So the sound waves must have a loud enough sound or a high enough amplitude to move that tympanic membrane, which is then going to rattle the bones of the middle ear, which is then going to allow the footplate of the stapes to vibrate against that window that we mentioned. So what's going to happen essentially is that these sound waves are going to be translated into fluid movement, which eventually will produce action potentials from nerve cells, which our brain can then interpret. So let's go step by step into where these sound waves go and how they get translated into sound that we can perceive. So as you can see in the picture here, we have sound waves that are entering the external ear, and they are finding their way to strike the eardrum or tympanic membrane and vibrate it. Number 3, tympanic vibrations move the malleus, which in turn move the incus and then the stapes. So what we have is a chain reaction from the tympanic membrane here of vibrations until finally it's able to vibrate on the oval window, which is going to slam into fluid that's in the scala vestibuli. So this area here, this compartment that has liquid inside of it, is going to have now energy waves of liquid traveling through it. The paralymph in the scala vestibuli of the cochlea begins a ripple that's transmitted through the vestibular membrane to the endolymph inside duct, to the basilar membrane, and then to the organ of Corti. What does that mean? Well, basically, this membrane right here can be moved. As that liquid has energy waves pass through it, it can push this membrane downward. And you remember all those things in that cochlear duct, the tectorial membrane, the organ of Corti. If you have a membrane push into either side of that, what you're going to have is stimulation of the little tiny nerve cells that are found in the organ of Corti, and that's going to allow action potentials to be propagated. So let's go ahead and look at the rest of the steps after that membrane is moved. So here we have a better, clearer picture of the stapes, which is going to be vibrating against the oval window. And in this case here, the vibration is felt in the cochlear duct because the membrane is being pushed against the cochlear duct. This membrane here is now going to push into the tectorial membrane and the organ of Corti of a cochlear duct, and that's going to transmit into sound by way of neurons that leave and wind up going into our auditory center of our brain. So this, what looks like this yellow sheet right here, these are nerve cells which are going to allow the message from in here to travel to the brain to be interpreted. Now, what happens to the energy wave after it comes in this way and strikes the membrane? Well, what's going to happen is it will continue on the other side through the paralymph and eventually hit what's called the round window, and right here they dampen out, so they nullify at the end. So all the sound coming in will move the membrane at various places, anywhere along this membrane here, depending on the pitch of the sound, or the frequency of the sound, and then the remaining energy wave will be dampened out by the round window. Things to keep in mind: the basilar membrane is not the same width and thickness throughout its length. High frequency sounds vibrate the narrow portion near the oval window, whereas low frequency sounds vibrate the wider, thicker portion near the apex of the cochlea. So if you have a high pitched sound, what's going to happen is this area here is going to be stimulated by the high-pitched sound. The energy wave strikes the membrane, it bends, causing an action potential, and it will be dampened out by the round window. If it's a low-pitched sound, what we would look for is the energy wave would strike somewhere at this end down here near the apex, and then whatever energy is left in the liquid will then travel down this way through the scala tympani and again dampen out at the round window. And that allows different pitches to be perceived by us. Now, the actual sound production takes place within the cochlear duct, and we were talking earlier and we said that as these membranes bend down towards the cochlear duct, they're going to push the tectorial membrane or the basilar membrane into one another, and that is going to allow nervous cells, hair cells, to be stimulated. If we take a close-up look of this structure right here, you can see that these nerve fibers are connecting to nerve cells that have stereocilia on the top. And these little hairs, when they are pressed against the tectorial membrane, are going to fire their action potential. It's going to open the sodium gates, allowing for nerve impulses to travel down the nerve fibers and eventually reach the brain. So these impulses will pass through relay stations through the medulla, the midbrain, and the thalamus before reaching the auditory area of the temporal lobe. So they have their own little route to follow, but this is how sound gets produced. The signal is transduced by this particular organ within our cochlear duct, and we're able to perceive that as sound through our brain's ability to integrate a message of stimuli. Next, I want to talk to you how the ear allows you to perceive balance. So at this point, we've talked about what goes down in the cochlea in this area here. But what about the rest? That's where your sense of balance comes into play. The vestibule, which is this area here, contains two key items, two key places. One is called the utricle and one's called the saccule. I kind of messed it all up, but here they are again. And here's your utricle and saccule. These little spaces are, they're just about at right angles to each other, the utricle being more horizontal and the saccule being vertical. And that's going to allow you to perceive two different types of motion, which we'll get to in a minute. We also know that there's semicircular canals here in the upper portion. The three of them are typically at right angles to each other as well, and they're going to allow us to perceive a different type of motion. All of these bony structures have membrane on the inside, and they're also filled with liquid. So the vestibular sense of balance comes from the vestibule, and what it's going to perceive is gravitational equilibrium, acceleration, deceleration, upward movement, downward movement. So it's straight line movement that we're talking about. And how it does so is actually through a stone on the inside of that area of the vestibule. We call it an otolith, an ear stone. So by you changing head positions, the stone, which is free to move within that area of the utricle or the saccule, will move, dragging forth and stimulating mechanically stimulated hair cells that are there. So if you were in a car sitting at a red light and you were not driving and someone slammed on the accelerator and your head went back, that's because an otolith has moved on a horizontal plane, striking the hair cells, allowing you to perceive that as forward motion. The same would happen if they put it in reverse and slammed on the accelerator. If you went to Cedar Point and you went on the demon drop and you were sitting in the chair at the very top and suddenly you drop, and you would feel a vertical downward motion that your saccule would then perceive because the otolith is now moving up and down. So if we take a look at what those ear stones look like, here you see a stone and you see that there's hair cells underneath it. So you can imagine if this stone was to move this way, if the person was to move in a forward direction and this stone dragged along these hair cells, that is their stimulus to start firing action potentials. So in either direction, your brain will be able to perceive it after those messages travel to the brain to be integrated and perceived as forward or backward motion. The same thing will happen if you move up and down. So in the utricle, you have a stone that sits on a vertical plane. And again, moving that stone up or down in the fluid medium will allow these hair cells to be triggered into action potentials, which again, your brain will perceive as straight line movement. The semicircular canal's job is to detect rotational equilibrium. And that's needed to maintain balance when a head or body is rotated or suddenly moved. The ability to detect changes in both direction and rate at which movement occurs. And inside of each semicircular canal are ampullae. Ampullae are little tiny lobbies where a structure called a copula exists. A copula is a gelatinous cap in which hair cells are embedded. And it doesn't respond to gravity, it only moves with flow of endolymph in semicircular canals. So the movement of the liquid past this copula is enough for it to fire an action potential, leading a person to perceive a rotational movement that their body is taking. So let's take a look at what one of these copulas looks like and how it behaves. So here is the gelatinous cap we know as a copula. And if you were to move your head suddenly, the flow of endolymph is to the left here, and it's going to allow the gelatinous cap to respond to that flow by bending. And when it bends, these little hair cells here are going to detect the bend, and they're going to fire action potentials down their nerves. And each semicircular canal has 2 of these ampullae, and therefore the circular movement of the fluid inside of these structures allow us to perceive that as rotational movement. A dancer, a ballet dancer, would definitely be in tune to her semicircular canals moving because there's so much spinning and nonlinear movement happening. So these copulas would constantly be bent in various directions, yet she would still be able to maintain her composure because of the fact that she does this every day. Her brain integrates that movement very well as part of her daily routine as she trains with these complicated moves. The firing rate that exists when you turn your head is going to be greater in one side than another depending on the way your head rotates. So in the case of a horizontal plane semicircular canal, if you were to turn your head to the right, what you would see happen is that the firing rate in the left semicircular canal would be a lot greater than that in the right. So each one is fine-tuned to respond to the way that the fluid moves and then produce information to your brain about directional movement so you don't get confused or lose your balance. And that obviously takes a lifetime of learning to be aware of those changes and adapt to them. Sports like ballet dancing, ice hockey, figure skating, diving, all those things require sudden changes in balance and equilibrium, but the athletes that train for them wind up doing fine because they are used to that type of repetition and then interpretation by their brain. With simpler animals, such as fish or arthropods, we see a couple of different systems in play. Fish have a lateral line system, which again utilize the copula as a basis for their ability to perceive disturbances in the water around them. So the water is able to get into the lateral line system and go past these copulas, which of course can bend the tip, which sends nerve impulses to the brain of the fish, and if it's a perceived threat, it may swim away from that water disturbance, and it will have these copulas every so often along the lateral line system. Arthropods, insects, they have statocysts, which contain a statolith, which is a stone that rolls around. You see the hair cells that are connected to nervous fibers, and those nerve fibers will transmit messages about the statolith on directional information, whether the animal is upright or upside down. There was an experiment where they used a metallic statolith inside of one of these statocysts, and by using a magnet on top of it, they were able to get the animal to swim upside down because it thought it was upright because of the position of the statolith. So this ball basically rolls around. It's a little stone ball, and it gives information, positional information, directional information to the animal that has this particular adaptation. So I hope this helped you understand the sense of hearing and balance a little bit better. I'll talk to you next time when we look into the sense of vision.